And thank you to Denny from NFL Mock Draft Database for sponsoring the panel. Yeah, so thank you for bringing us in. You know, we are in the big guy section, so that's fair. That's fair. So yeah, I don't know. What do we do next?
So Devy, talk about Devy.
Questions? That's a good question. So. Devy stands for developmental, I believe is the initial reason it's called that. But basically it's a dynasty league where you also have some element of drafting players in college or possibly younger. And when they move up to the NFL, they move up to your NFL team. You know, it's just another element to that.
No, you nailed it.
That's Devy.
Right, there we go. Is that good enough? So, you know, I always say for people that haven't done it, like, try it. Even if you don't watch college football, even if you're not into it, it's just another asset that you can use in a dynasty league. Some of the best to most successful players have been people that don't watch college, go in and trade all their Devy picks for NFL players and have a really good NFL team. Like, it's not a bad way to start. And then eventually you kind of get into it, so.
Yeah, and I would just say, you know, I think all of us love the NFL draft, and I think that's how a lot of this started with prospect evaluation and all that stuff, and then people kind of got together and said, hey, wait, can we do this the year before? And then the arms race of, all right, well, I like this guy a year out, I like this guy 2 years out. Well, I know a guy's a 5-star on Rivals, so that's going to be my guy, and I think it kind of evolved from that, and now there's all these, you know, great evaluations, and it's a pretty sharp market nowadays, I would say. So, fun stuff.
I think it makes the NFL draft a lot more fun, too. I mean, you're watching the draft, and you're rooting for these guys to go. Like, it didn't work out this year for, like, I love Izzy Abanikanda. Didn't really work out, but it was still fun just watching the whole thing, and I think it makes the draft just that much better, you know, even just beyond, like, the playing and rooting for your own guys and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think for me, I think the strategy of a little bit more unknown is exciting, you know, and like the dynasty space as a whole, like there's so much information out there, there's so much strategy. It's a pretty mature space, whereas with Devy, like there's a lot more of problem-solving onus on yourself, where you have to kind of figure out processes a little bit more on your own. So it's a little bit more freestyle, a little bit more self-ownership, which is cool. And there's like a lot of room for strategy development. And then like it gives you a reason. For me personally, I didn't really watch college football before I got into Devy. And so it gave me a reason to be invested into college football, right? And so like I still don't watch football, but I dabble a little bit. No, but the spreadsheets, I like watching the spreadsheets as the game go along. And exactly. I just watch the bar on ESPN that's scrolling across the bottom. Izzy Abanikanda, another rushing touchdown against Virginia Tech. Yeah.
Yeah, so to answer your question, Jared, like what do I like about Devy? It's just another asset to trade, right? My favorite part of all leagues, other than winning, is trading. I think that's what makes it a lot more exciting, right? Like, if you decide that you want an extra Devy pick, then I get a better chance to make my team better on the NFL side faster, right? Because you want to, maybe your team isn't as good, you want to build that up over the next couple of years. That gives you the chance to do that. And you get to do it, I think, a little bit faster with names attached to picks, right? When we do rookie drafts, they're just picks. There's no names. It doesn't matter because you have the pick itself. But as soon as you actually attach a name to it, I think it's more fun. Like, you're now rooting for something in college football, which is part of why I will never draft a Wisconsin Badger. But, like, that's beside the point, right?
Braylon Hallam is sitting right here, you know?
I think we'd all see him.
You're right. He's a large man. He is. For me, as I said, my base is actually starting in college fantasy football, which my first year was 2001. So I've always kind of come from that college perspective. So I've just always loved the fantasy element because you get wall-to-wall games day, noon, night, up until Hawaii is done at the break of morning. So there's just so much action. But when it comes to Devy, what I like is I don't like to share. I don't like to share my toys. I don't like to share my things. So when I see somebody come in that I want, it's my guy, I want to be able to get them and have them be mine for that amount of time. So the freshman class comes in this year, and it's a banner quarterback class. The Dante Moores, the Nico Yamileava. I don't know. We'll hear it a million times, however it's sped. Jackson Arnold wins the Elite 11. Malachi Nelson, the next up at USC. So there's all these really attractive players that you have to wait until they graduate college, have gone through the draft process, and have already had draft capital assigned to take them in dynasty leagues. In Devy leagues, there's no draft capital assigned. You're going off your scouting, your feelings, and your intuitions, and you reap the rewards, or the agony of defeat. So I like that you're doing it before everybody else gets a chance to. You're on the initial curve of these players, and you feel ownership to them. You feel that kindred spirit where you've invested, you've identified them, and then you profit. So I like the long game. I like the come up, and that's what the beauty is of college fantasy and Devy.
And I think to tie some of those together too is, Nelly talking about the unknown as a great part of it, where you can be like the Devy marketplace and be like Kane and trade, to gain value. You can pick to gain value. You can be like Froton and I want my guy and I want to hold on to him for until he retires. I think that is fun as well, that you have so many different strategies, and I love, using people's strategies against them. They use mine against me, and I think it makes for a more interesting league. So. John.
Well, it generally it's all going to depend on league size, and that'll dictate strategy, right? So shallow Devy is probably like 2 rounds a year. You have just a handful of elite prospects on each Devy roster. Keeps the rookie drafts fun, so that's kind of a good way for new people to Devy to get involved. They get the big names that everyone kind of knows about, but you still have these rookie drafts, deeper Devy, and then even beyond that, C2C, your whole roster, your whole taxi squad is full of those elite guys, but then also those long shots that, like, you stake your claim on a guy like Froton was talking about, and you take a shot because you have to, because you're deep in drafts, and that'll deplete your rookie drafts, and it changes strategy, right? Like in a shallow Devy, you're going to have quarterbacks that are going to kind of come out of nowhere. Will Levis kind of did that. Kenny Pickett wasn't really on the Devy radar. It happens every once in a while. Trey Lance, another guy. Zach Wilson, even, unless you're Felix Sharp, was not on the Devy radar. Well, that's a side topic we can get into. I prefer not to talk about that. But in like a deeper Devy draft, you have to address the quarterback position, because you're not going to get those names coming in, and obviously the quarterback is incredibly important in Superflex, which is what most of us play at this point. So it changes strategy for sure. But yeah, it's all going to depend on the rules and how you react to them.
I think another part of that strategy too, right? When we're thinking like shallow versus deep, like I'm in a shallow league, I'm just trying to hit doubles, baby. We're not trying to hit home runs. I just want the players that are going to make it to the NFL. And because I don't have to make as vast of a swing. I'm not like, which now 4-star guy, because 4-star freshman coming in, do I have to draft to my Devy team? Because the pool has been so depleted already, right? When it comes to a shallow league, I'm just trying to get the guys that I know are going to, if I think they're going to have day 2 capital, I'm going to draft them, right? Like, I just want to make sure that they're going to go to the NFL, they're going to have solid enough draft capital, and that's enough for me, right? Because to me, I only play with value in mind, so as long as they get to the NFL and they get day 2 capital, someone's going to want them, right? Because they're on an NFL roster. We did it. We got that first box checked, right? We got rid of the risk of them being in college football and not scoring points for us. So that's the way that I look at it. In the deep leagues, then you want to go for the home runs, right? Because there's so few players remaining. So you really have to try to knock it out of the park. And in the shallow leagues, just get guys that you know are going to be good and hit doubles, and you're safe.
Yeah, no, I think Kane makes a great point. For me, I want as deep as I can get. That's why I love C2C, because you're going to have 45 guys in your roster, and everybody has a place where, all right, I could be taking this, G5 QB who's probably not going to get drafted, but he plays for Georgia Southern like Davis Brin, and they're going to throw the ball all over the place, and it's a 6-point per passing touchdown league. So I do like having the full, picture of your, your roster in mind. But, when it comes to Devy, I think the doubles method is pretty solid. How many home runs are you going to be like? How many guys are really going to be those elite ones? And especially with QBs, like if you invested in DJU, if you invested in Spencer Rattler, if you invested in the entire 2021 QB class, and even Kenny Pickett didn't come in. He threw 18 touchdowns each of his first 3 years. He was just a guy. Mark Whipple comes in, changes the system, and he's whipping the ball around to Bletnikoff winner Jordan Addison. So with the QBs, I feel like you have to stockpile them because you don't know how it's going to develop in a lot of ways. So the more, the better. I like the deeper formats, and I agree with the doubles method on Kane. Just get me guys who I can see a path for.
Yeah, and these guys are grizzled veterans, as you can hear from that. I'm like, a lot of my work is in the redraft space. So I started a Devy league this year, and it's one spot. I think a lot of people, when they first hear about Devy, they're like, oh my God, I don't watch enough college football. These guys are breaking down, the incoming draft classes and talking about all these guys. It's like, I watch Ohio State. I know who Marvin Harrison Jr. is, and that's my guy. I think as you grow your knowledge, you kind of get to that. But I think a lot of these people coming from the redraft space, or, now there's funnels from sports betting, college football, DFS, all these people that are interested, but they're a little afraid to get into the campus to Canton or other things like that. So, I think it's good to have beginner funnels, the training wheels, and then you kind of move on to, the big boy stuff.
And I think it's nice that you can. You can literally do one Devy spot, whatever you're comfortable with. But I kind of wanted to bring it in, unless somebody else has another question. I wanted to. Oh, go ahead.
Philosophically, if we were here last year and we were discussing Tajay Spears and Zach Evans, I would assume everyone on the panel would have gone Zach Evans. Tajay Spears clearly got more draft capital. What is your philosophy on P5 to G5 running back specifically, and how do you handle that dynamic in a Devy?
I guess I'll start here. Generally speaking, I don't want G5, especially in. I would never have had Tajay Spears over Zach Evans at the very least. But yeah, in Devy, obviously C2C is completely different. But in Devy, yeah, different animal. But in Devy, I'm just not. I got burned with Lou Nichols. I fell in love with Lou Nichols, and I really did. And I'm hyping him up on my podcast and everything. I'm telling people, go make sure you got Lou Nichols. And then, he's just nothing. And that was my bad, guys. But I learned from my mistakes. So yeah, I wouldn't have had Tajay. But another thing with Zach Evans, though, is I think it's kind of one of those things where, look at what happened. He had issues when he was recruited. Then he went to another school. Sometimes we got to look at the context of these players. And I'm not saying that it's always going to work, but there was kind of some signs that maybe Zach Evans didn't have his head on straight and screwed on straight, and maybe that's why he fell so far in the draft. I still like the player. I've drafted him in startups and stuff, the last rounds or whatever. But I drafted him in a couple of my rookie drafts. But yeah, it's kind of it's iffy with stuff like that. But what do you guys think about G5?
Look, I think it means kind of one. Devy's hard. Devy is hard, and the hit rates are so low. No, I was never going to have any Tajay Spears. It just wasn't going to happen because the day two potential capital for G5 running backs is so low. So if I'm throwing a dart at every G5 running back, I'm going to hit 1 out of 100, and I'll miss out on Tajay Spears, right? And I'll make that miss. And you have to be okay with that in Devy. I'm someone that watches a lot of film for the NFL draft side. I love guys like Pierre Strong coming out. I drafted him in Devy. He got drafted, but it's not helping my Devy team. It wasn't a good pick for me to ever make, even if he probably would have gotten a little higher capital. So, I think you have to accept that there's going to be players that you're going to miss on, and it becomes about a hit rate game for me in Devy.
Yeah, I mean, me personally, I had Tajay Spears as my running back 3, Zach Evans down at running back 20. So I don't know what you guys are talking about. I thought that was really obvious that was going to happen. I had info on his knee, his medical, it was all clear. Shane's right. He nails it on the head. It's really hard, right? Like, the NFL projects prospects for a living. Like, they pour a ton of resources, a ton of time, and they're still not that good at it, right? So, like, us doing it as, as I don't know, amateurs. Amateurs in a sense compared to them. It's incredibly hard. So you can't hit 100%. No one hits 100%. But Shane's right. Like, it really comes down, at least to me, to hit rates philosophically. It's like, from a big picture, Power 5 guys are much more likely to get relevant draft capital than G5 guys. If you want to go in and watch the film and think about it critically from an NFL GM's perspective, it could change things. But that's like a lot of work, and then you still don't really have any sort of confirmation that your evaluation's true there. So, like, big picture-wise, unless we're talking super deep Devy, G5 is like completely crossed off for me. But it's kind of cool now with the transfer portal, which we haven't touched on. A guy like Tajay Spears, if he was 3 years later, Tajay Spears may have ended up at a Power 5 school after 2 years at Tulane if he didn't hurt his knee twice. But, like, we kind of have that fluidity on the college side now where we can get more information earlier about these G5 guys because we're kind of told, hey, they're actually not G5 guys in terms of the skill level.
I know you came to me for the analytics, so I'll help out here. Believe it or not, because this is just one thing I weirdly know off the top of my head, over the past, I think, 8 years, 80% of running backs that were top 24 running backs are actually from a Power 5 school. So, like, the stats just make sense to continue to draft P5 guys. When you're basically having outliers, and those outliers happen to be guys that just, like, consistently year over year, we're top 24 running backs, right? You can't, like, dedupe that out of the stats, right? Like, they were year over year, they were great players in the NFL, so they were great for fantasy football, right? But the stats still remain the same. It's about 75 to 80% of all top 24 running backs were drafted from a P5 school. Like, it just is what it is, so I'm just going to keep riding that hit rate. I'm obviously going to miss some, right? We're going to miss the Zach Evans. We're going to miss some of these guys, right? Somehow Trey Sermon made it to the NFL. Yeah.
Sounds like my 12. You gotta come to me, John. I'll look good.
Yeah, but you know what I mean? Like, it just gets to the point of, like, I'm trying to hit doubles. I'm not trying to hit the home run. I just want the guy that's going to be hopefully a top 100 draft capital, which now with running backs, we're actually seeing that, like, day 3 and that round 4 is basically the same now. But I'm just trying to find guys that are in that, top 125, top 130 kind of draft capital. That's the goal.
Yeah, when you get into the G5, you want to be in a system where you have deeper slots. Obviously, if you have 5 Devy slots, it's going to be tough to put a G5 in there. That being said, what do I look at when I'm shopping there? It's pretty easy. You have to, if you're looking G5, the AAC is going to be the first place you look because the difference between the American Athletic Conference and the other 4 conferences is vast. And within that framework, I'm going to be looking at historically relevant programs. You look at Memphis, Antonio Gibson, Kenneth Gainwell, D'Angelo Williams, dialing it back in the day. The Rams running back there who escapes me at the moment. Bang. A full plate of the system producing and them identifying and developing 3-star players to NFL level. Development matters. UAB, you see Dwayne McBride. UAB is a solid, dependable program. We've seen them churn out running backs year after year. You look at Houston, Tank Dell, Clayton Tune, Dana Holgerson as the coach. He's got a system in place that he's produced guys year after year after year. So you want to look at coaching staffs and historical projections from the schools that you're drafting them out of. If you're going to Rice to find, a NFL running back, you're probably going to the wrong place. But if you're looking at the more successful programs, as we saw Cincinnati be able to take it and do it, they're now in the Power 5 now. But the AAC is where you shop in the G5. You'll get some, maybe San Diego State with their history with Rashad Penny, Adam Muema, Donnell Pumphrey, the legacy they had. You could say that. Boise State also, Jay Ajayi. Some of the the players they produced, but it's the elite tippity-top schools in the Mountain West, or it's the American Athletic Conference, and you can pretty much throw out the MAC, the CUSA, and the Sun Belt for those purposes. So that's what I kind of try to do if I'm going G5, is to attack the elite, historically productive colleges.
Do you have a topic you want to raise?
And come on and take a seat. Come on and you can walk in front of here. We're good. So come sit down. Enjoy yourselves.
Oh, you want to talk about?
Yeah.
Okay.
I would just throw out there as well, we're kind of in a big transition phase in college football with NIL and players transferring every year. This is especially true with production research because historically we had guys staying at the same school for 2, 3, 4 years, and now we see a Jahmyr Gibbs go from this strange Georgia Tech system to, Alabama. And some people were kind of on Gibbs as a high-end prospect before that, but him transferring to Alabama gives him a nice boost. And one thing I'm thinking about that I'm sure these guys are thinking about too, like these secondary professional leagues like the XFL and all that, I feel like it's only a matter of time before some of these high school prospects eventually start to sign with those teams. And then, what do those production profiles look like, and how do we sort of evaluate that at all? So I actually think film and guys that are sort of watching the play-by-play and all that stuff, I actually think that's going to get a little more valuable.
I like it. You good?
Any other questions?
In supplemental drafts, once you get past the first couple rounds, including your main freshmen and the main guys coming back to work hard, what's your strategy after that second round? Or like the drafting running backs would say, like, are you getting at guys who have film like Corey Barnes or Quentin Jackson or whatever, or are you looking at guys like a Kane who have that prototypical ability?
It's a good question. The question was, when you start to get past those first couple rounds of Devy, how are you evaluating prospects and who you're looking at? I think we'll all have different answers because I think we all have different processes, which is fun, which is good. I'm an NFL draft guy, so generally for me when I'm drafting Devy, I want the guys that I think will have the highest draft capital. That's all I care about. You can be a first round bust, great. As Kane said before, we can trade you away before you bust out, right? So, I might look at a guy like Jaquindon Jackson from Utah, who I think has a decent NFL draft profile and is, on my radar as a player that I might draft. Not very high in Devy, but there's a point where that draft capital wins out to me over a four-star freshman, or taking more of that home run hit. Maybe it's a little bit safer. So that's kind of how I approach it, and I like I said, I think everyone's going to approach it a little bit differently.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, I think the first thing that I personally try and narrow down is what is my goal with these players that I'm drafting. And for me personally, I want to get draft capital for players because I think that's the easiest first step of like linearity of how do we predict this, as opposed to predicting this player is going to be good in the NFL, because that takes multiple steps of do they get the draft capital? Do they get the opportunity? Is the situation okay? And I think that gets a little convoluted. So for me, I'm just trying to get a player that's going to get relevant draft capital when I make these picks. And there is some predictability once you hit those later rounds. I think there's more predictability with guys who we've seen perform already at a certain expectation level or above an expectation level for someone who can eventually go on to be a pro and earn relevant draft capital. And I think for me, while that potentially has a little bit lower upside than some freshmen, I think there's a little bit more safety there. And so like a guy like you're talking about, Caden Fegan, he's a freshman coming in. He's a 4-star prospect. So hit rates there are okay. They're not phenomenal. And we've never seen him play college football before. So there's so much unknown there. And so rather than projecting him to potentially earn a role eventually, a guy like Jaquindon Jackson, who's probably going in a similar range, we've seen him perform to a certain extent. And they're like similar like archetypes of running backs. And while Jaquindon Jackson's a little bit older, So there's a little bit less upside there in terms of like the ceilings that you can hit as a prospect. There's a little bit more safety, a little bit more ease and projection from my perspective. So that's something I like a little bit more. That being said, the upside is incredibly important. First couple rounds, you're not getting any sort of upside that matches what those top tier freshmen give you. So that's when you, from my perspective, that's when you have to attack those, because ultimately the upside is how you get those, the guys, the difference makers in your dynasty leagues that win you leagues, right? The guys who go in the first couple rounds of startups. But it's a balancing act. I like to consider the expected value of each player in terms of what can we realistically project them to in terms of taking in all their potential outcomes, what's the average outcome there, and compare them, right? And if someone has a higher expected value in terms of taking into consideration all those outcomes, that's ultimately a better bet.
Yeah, more than likely, I'm going to draft running backs and wide receivers that are from Power 5 conferences that have already done things, right? That have already started to get a significant, what's that word you always, yippa-tippa? Yippa-tippa, which I don't know what that means, but he says it's important, so I just trust him. No, it's yards per team pass attempt. So, like, as long as they're on the field and they're making plays, and you can see that they're making plays, and, you know, especially if you're at maybe a lower G5 or a lower Power 5 school, they have to be the best player on the field, right? If you watch a game, you're like, that guy's good. Like, that means something, right? Because there's not a ton of great talent around him. So the other thing I try to do is just limit inherent risk. So what that means to me is if the hit rate's going to be low, I probably don't want him. If the chances are that I'm looking between two players and I have them valued identical, I'm going to take the one that's going to be the NFL faster. Right, because I want to limit the risk that they're in college longer. We've seen too many injuries out of college guys. We've seen it to the point even where they come back for an extra year and just shit the bed, right? Like that they've just been absolutely awful when they could have been, you know, a top 100 pick or top 50 pick the year before, but they're trying to hit that like top 10, top 15 capital. So that's something that I try to do. I just want to limit the risk because then my players are going to be in the NFL, right? That's the goal. Because I can trade them. I don't care who they are. I have no attachment to any player ever. I can trade them at any time, and that's the beauty of it, at least for me.
I'm so much more faithful to my players than you are, Kane, I think. I don't even know their names. I want to cuddle them. You know, I want to bring them in, give them a hug. Yeah, I understand. But when it comes to running backs, what I look at is I want them to be at least 210 pounds. You know, that's the baseline, because who knows? You get into the 200-pound and less range, the metrics are so hard to be the Devin A. Chains, to be the Jahmyr Gibbses. But I also look for dominance metrics, yards after contact, broken tackle rate, breakaway rate. You know, how many 10-plus yards runs, how many 15-plus yards runs are they doing? And obviously at the power level, of course, because bigger running backs who break tackles, finish runs, are elusive, and are fast. All that goes into play. Obviously, you want to look at 100-meter times if you don't have 40s. A lot of kids don't have 40s on them. You look at their 100 meters in high school. If they run track now, like A-Chain, you know, with a 10-2-2, you know, elite testing metrics coupled with dominance metrics, breaking tackles, breakaway runs, and size. So that's the general way I go about at least sifting out the running back position for Devy purposes, and you know, he's sort of getting eyes on them from there and judging their just overall talent, like you said.
John, your thoughts?
So I've been doing some research for DLF, looking into a lot of the college prospects and some of the best recruits that are, you know, going into college. And honestly, like, the hit rates aren't all that amazing. They're, you know, roughly 20% if you're just kind of throwing darts. And that's even for the best players, the 5-star prospects, all that kind of stuff. So, you know, Nelly was touching on the fact that these players that have already done something, like a Jaquindon Jackson, you know, like a Dorian Singer, like somebody like that. You know, those are the guys that I'm kind of going for. But also, like Nelly said, you know, you don't want to reach for them too early, because if everyone else is going to let them fall to the third, you don't need to take them in the first or the second. So, you know, like in a recent draft, I really wanted Dorian Singer that I just talked about, but I knew that I could wait a round or two before I had to get him. So I still took a Cedric Baxter, you know, 5-star freshman running back, you know, because I know I can get both players if I do it this way. I can't do it the opposite way. It's not going to work. Cedric Baxter's never falling to the second, third round, whatever. So that's kind of been my goal, is trying to figure out the way to be the most the way to be the most efficient, but also, you know, getting the players that are going to be productive and get to my teams as quickly as possible, but also put up fantasy points and draft capital and all that kind of stuff as well. So it's tough. The one thing I will say from all the research and everything is don't ever draft a tight end in Devy. Just don't do it. Like, it's so bad. The hit rates are terrible. I mean, just think about how many 5-star tight ends are just like wasting away on rosters, you know, in all these places. Just do not waste your draft capital on any kind of tight end until they prove that they are the next Brock Bowers, the next Kyle Pitts. That's when you want to go trade for him, do whatever. Once you've done that, that's fine, but don't ever draft a tight end.
Yeah, that's these guys are kind of talking about, you know, coming up. I think of Stephon Diggs as a great example of a guy who went to Maryland, chose to go to a lesser school, stay home, and he could have gone, you know, anywhere. And he suffered greatly with that quarterback play back then. And he dropped to the 5th round, but it was like people who drafted him still believed in the talent. I'm sure some of them gave it up, but, you know, I think there's a bias you put yourself towards where you're like, well, he's on an NFL roster. I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt and still kind of root for him here. But that's what I'm currently doing with Justin Ross, and it's pretty painful at this point. It's been a rough 4 years.
Yeah, the injuries really do hurt. I mean, you know, there's so many players that we can talk about. Even Kayshon Boutte this year. You know, people had him as their wide receiver 1 for the longest time. And then they were kind of – the worst part about it is that they weren't willing to give up on that player once he showed that he was no longer doing it. And I think that's important too is, you know, you have to – I get it. Like, I fall in love with players too, but at some point you have to look at what's actually happening on the field and be like, all right, this guy's not the wide receiver 1 in the class anymore.
Did you have another topic you want to bring up?
No.
Before?
Oh, I forgot.
All right. That was good, Dave.
Yeah, so 2 things. I think the first thing, the transition from Dynasty to Devy feels a bit weird, right? It's a bit wonky. You're like, oh, like, I just want to know where these people are going to be when I draft them, right? I totally get it. But I think one of the easiest things that you can do is just add 1 or 2 rounds of Devy. Don't do this like I know a lot of the leagues that I run are all 5+ rounds of Devy. You don't have to do that. Make it 1 and make your rookie draft still fun. Right? Because if I'm only drafting 12 people, that doesn't mean that all 12 are going to be in the NFL in the same year. Right? So, like, your rookie drafts are still going to be an absolute blast. Right? So I think that's one thing that you can do pretty easily that makes it not as daunting. And in the same vein of that, right, you can combine the Devy and the rookie draft year 1, so you're not having someone that has the 101 in the rookie and the 101 in the Devy at the same time, right? Their team becomes very, very good quickly. So if you can just add them together, because then if you feel like you're not quite there on the Devy, we'll just draft the rookie, right? It makes it a lot easier, and then never forget that you can just trade the pick. There's going to be someone in your league, especially a guy like me, that's going to want the pick that you have, right? And because I'm going to want to draft more Devy players. So if you just add all that together, I think that can help kind of lower the anxiety and lower the pressure of kind of what's going on.
Yeah, and I think advice-wise, like, the biggest thing that I try and stress to people is don't look at your Devy players with rose-colored glasses. Like, understand that there is so much unknown still. There's so much downside. You look at it every single year. The rankings a year before the draft, you have guys who were considered to be locks, considered to be definite guys who are going to be relevant, who fell off for one reason or another, whether it be injuries, whether it be off-the-field stuff, whether it just be a lack of performance. So don't assume that a player is going to be something that they are not yet. You know what I mean? Like, so the biggest thing is don't trade established NFL players for a college player who may eventually become what that established NFL player is already. You know, like last year you would see people trading, I don't know, someone like Chris Olave who got first-round draft capital for Keishon Butte, who might eventually get first-round draft capital. And it's one of those things of like, maybe there's a little bit more upside, maybe you like the prospect a little bit more, but ultimately there's a lot more downside that it's easy to ignore because it's fun to look at these Devy guys and be like, oh, this guy's going to be a future star. But also, they might just be irrelevant because that just happens because there's so much unknown. So it's don't, like, just go into it with the full picture of knowledge of things could go wrong. I think that's super important.
I guess I'll go the opposite direction of Kane here and say, you know, for the Devy purposes, yeah, you ease into it. But I would say do an isolated college fantasy football league that has no ties to the NFL so that you can just sit there and just bathe in the college landscape. And even though it's not going to be Devy-oriented specifically, as you get more familiar with just the pool itself, you'll see these players that are performing well, and they'll rise to the top. And so even if it's during, you know, you're doing pickups and stuff, even if it's G5 guys, you'll see guys rising to the top, and you'll just organically, naturally say, oh, wow, this guy's doing well. And it'll just, through the course of the season, because you don't have to worry about, oh, is this guy going to be an NFL guy? Just immerse yourself into one team, follow what's happening just in college and just the flow of it, without the pressure of having the Devy, you know, and maybe you do the one league where, you know, you have 1 or 2 rounds. But if you just go and just do the separate world of college fantasy football, you're going to get a full picture of everything that's in there. And it's going to help you where, oh, well, they're talking about this guy. Oh, I know that guy. He plays for, you know, Utah. And, okay, now I get it. Jaquindon Jackson. Cool, I should take a look at him. So it'll sort of organically sort of incept into your brain because you'll be looking at such a deep pool, you'll see who funnels their way up. So that's kind of another way to look at it.
Real quick, and I'll get you. I just wanted to say, if you're only doing one, you know, it's just so easy to go see who's already producing. Like, you know, from this past season, everyone knew Bijan Robinson was going to be great, like that kind of stuff. So when you're first getting into it, you know, you really just want to do that, and it's so easy to find. I think these guys even didn't some of you guys get just like fix Fantasy Pros Devy rankings and stuff. I mean, there's so many different websites you can go to, DLF and you know, wherever else. Yeah. So I mean, you can find those rankings so easily, and then you can use some of the stuff that, you know, I was talking about before, where, you know, you want to focus on some of the running backs and like some of these top end players. Everyone knows Marvin Harrison Jr.'s name right now, you know. So like, if you're literally just talking about one round of Devy, I think it's pretty easy to get into it. And then once you do that, you'll probably want to get into 2 rounds and 3 rounds and 5 rounds. But actually, I'm sorry, you had a question? I know that I'm pretty sure you guys have a pretty good way to get in there.
Yeah. I mean, there's a bunch. I would definitely suggest, you know, you want to start a new league. I want to start a new league or join a league. So, you know, Devy Marketplace, we have a Discord literally with a section of, hey, you know, you're doing a startup, go in there. Hey, I just want to do a 1-round Devy leagues. Anyone want to join, you can get people. You know, DLF still has the old school, like, 2000 forums, and you can, you know, but people are on there looking for, you know, Devy leagues, right? So I think those resources are out there. I think a lot of us would be happy if, like, hey, I'm starting a 1-round Devy league. You know, tag me on Twitter. Can you retweet it and get people? I think we'll all, yeah, it will help you get people. We want more people to do it. So platform-wise, it really is like always. What's up to you?
Spreadsheets, Google
yeah.
stuff like that. And there are some Fantrax does it where you can actually have Fantrax, you can actually have college players on your team. If you use Sleeper, if you prefer that, or like MFL, with MFL, you can just like write in a name. That's an easy way to do it. You just kind of like a make a player kind of deal. Sleeper, you really can't do that, but like I do multiple Devy leagues on Sleeper, and I just have a Google sheet, so it's not really that difficult. We even originally we had placeholders, and we probably tried to make it more difficult than it needed to be. And I'm like, I don't even know why we're doing this. Like literally just have a Google sheet. John has this player, TD has this player, and that kind of thing. So it's pretty easy, but I know their Discord or whatever, the Devy Marketplace, you can easily find people and just tweet it on Twitter like, hey, I'm looking for a Devy league, I'm looking for a C2C league, and you will get a ton of people that are like, oh, I'm ready to do it. Are we starting today? Like that kind of thing. But I wanted to ask these guys, because I know I have my own opinion, but Toronto was talking about how you only have, if you only have like one round versus if you have like an 8-round Devy league, that kind of thing. How do you attack freshmen versus proven players in the shallow leagues versus the deep leagues? Because I feel like I personally don't really want to wait 3 years or 4 years or possibly 5 years with some of these players nowadays to get those players onto my team. Obviously, C2C, campus to Canton leagues are a little different because you're actually scoring points. But with the Devy leagues, do you prioritize anything differently depending on how that goes? Or, like Nelly was talking earlier, are you just going for the upside of those studs? Like, I know Cedric Baxter's going to be amazing. I've drafted a lot of Cedric Baxter, so you're going to hear me say his name a lot of times.
Yeah, I would say if there's one round, I have a harder time just making my own spin on it. The ADP is pretty good for one round of a Devy league now. And, like these guys were talking about, when I first started, I was copying off other people's homework all the time, man, whether it was NFL draft guys or DLF and, football guys. Like, I was just, like, in those forums reading up on, who did this guy update and what's their new sort of ranking and what are these guys talking about today? Who are they talking about? And then, it kind of grows from there. But, yeah, once you kind of get to, like, 3, 4, 5 rounds, you can start to put your own spin on things and say, all right, this is my guy. It's probably not the right time to take him yet, but, I'm going to go for it and have fun with it. But one round, you're like, all right, I'm really going to pass on Brock Bowers for, some random guy. So, yeah.
Freshman strategy. Yeah. I mean, it's really hard to give you like one exact answer, right? Like I think a lot of it's going to depend on individual situations of who's already gone, what am I looking at here. Ultimately, I think it is. I mean, I was talking about it before, the EV, the expected value. That's really how I view every pick that I make in terms of trying to throw together. Here are the range of outcomes. Here's the average of that range of outcomes. Which player is higher? Now, in a situation like that, if I have a freshman and an established player, and when I put together that the expected value and it's the same, the freshman provides more upside, and upside is the ultimate tiebreaker there. But it's really going to depend on specific situations. I think having hard and fast rules is. It's good to have guidelines, but hard and fast rules are not necessarily a good thing because strategy is ever evolving. Individual situations in drafts are always unique, and so it's good to be flexible and to be able to adjust to those guidelines you have set in place.
Let me give you some hard and fast rules. So if I have a single round of Devy, I'm never drafting a 4-star freshman, right? Because the pool is so large of players that why would I spend the time on trying to get a hit rate that's going to be like, what is it, 20%, 15%, something like the hit rate just doesn't make sense when I can already get like a wide receiver that's produced 2,500 yards over the past 2 seasons at a P5 or at a Power 5 conference. So I'm just going to take him. Like, it's probably easier, especially when he's already being talked about in the first round, whether it's a Romeo Dunze, a Troy Franklin, any of those guys. I would rather do that than. Like, I want to chase the upside too, but I'm going to chase just 5-star freshman upside rather than 4-star freshman upside because there's what feels like 872 4-star freshmen coming in every single year. So it's hard to know which one's going to be which, right? And half of those teams are going to end up firing their coach at some point, and so a new scheme's going to come. It just gets really, really difficult. So most of the time I just say, I'm not going to do it. Just give me the established guy. Give me the Brock Bowers. Let me draft an Ohio State wide receiver. That's usually helpful because they seem to do well. Like, those are just some things that I try to do. It makes it like just a tad easier.
I'm similar. I'm usually targeting second and third year players, specifically in campus to Canton and Devy leagues, because you haven't seen the freshmen play, and year after year, we see it happen constantly where guys get over-recruited. You see this guy come in. Jaden Blue, if we're going to use Cedric Baxter, we might as well use Jaden Blue, was one of the running backs last year coming in. And he went to Texas. He was a top 5 running back, and, we all expected good things. Well, it was Bijan and Roshan that he wasn't penetrating that backfield. And then this year comes in, Jonathan Brooks is running 3. In comes Cedric Baxter, as he mentioned, who looks like a reasonable facsimile of Bijan, the way that he cuts at full speed and all his tape. And then he gets over-recruited. Now you have a dead asset. He's gone. He's gone. He's worthless. Almost similar, you could say, with Georgia, with Andrew Paul, and Branson Robinson both coming in last year. Andrew Paul tore his ACL, but he was killing camp. Where you have these very close, a high 4-star, a 9.833 versus a 9.657, whatever your 247 rating is, you're going to see those guys who are ranked lower take over the ones who have higher ratings. And it happens a lot across the Power 5. I want to see at least something. Give me something that they've done in college where I've at least gotten eyes on them on a college football field for me to be able to really feel good about investing them in a Devy format. I do agree. You have to be special for me to really go whole hog on you as a freshman. You have to be like Nick Singleton type of just easy call.
Yeah, so the way that I see it, especially when it comes to trading, this is kind of similar, but I just want to touch on this first. If at any time I feel like I can trade a player for what I believe to be their ceiling in the NFL, I'm going to do that. I think that's one easy place to start. And to answer the rest of the question, I think it gets difficult, right? Trying to figure out where you are versus where the market is. And I'm probably going to be pretty close to the market and pretty close to ADP the first probably round and a half, because those are our kind of bona fide guys that are crushing it, right? We have Marvin Harrison Jr., we have Emeka Egbuka, we have Brock Bowers, those sort of guys that are just crushing it, and they have for a couple years, right? So the way that I see it is if I'm a little higher, that's where I'm going to do those kind of third, fourth, fifth round. If I'm in kind of a deeper league, kind of take those shots. And I can always, because I'm a value guy, so if I believe that their value is going to be higher in, say, a month, 6 months, a year down the road versus the other option, I'm going to take that guy regardless of what the market says, because I want the guy that has more value, because I am able to trade, if that makes sense. Yeah, they're relatively close, right?
Sure, and it's also a little bit tougher than in Dynasty because market value is much less established because it's a smaller group of people. There's much less consensus in terms of what that market value actually is, which makes it fun, but it also makes it difficult to value players. That being said, if you feel like you have, like, the first couple rounds is generally pretty established market value-wise, it's the same once you start looking at it as an asset. It's the same as in Dynasty. If you're lower than the market value on them, then that's a player you probably want to move because your personal projection is lower than what everyone else thinks it's going to be, and vice versa. So once you kind of transition from players to assets in terms of how you're analyzing it, it's the same as in Dynasty. Yeah.
All right, well, we're going to wrap up. We're almost running out of time, but we are happy to take, I mean, at least I am. I imagine everyone is, questions afterwards outside, like come out, talk to us. We're all pretty chill. But let's run down, tell everyone where you're at and where they can find you.
Sure. Russell J. Clay on Twitter. I'm at Fantasy Guru, and I enjoy talking college football, so let's do it.
Absolutely. I'm John Arrington, Dynasty Coach A on Twitter. I am the host of the Devy Devotional Podcast, the host of the Monocle Dynasty Podcast, and the host of the Full Tilt Devy Podcast. If you can't tell already, I like to talk. I also write for DLF, and I do some Devy and C2C writing for them as well. So you can always find me there, and I'm happy to talk to anyone afterward if anyone has any other questions. I know we didn't probably get to everybody.
Yep, Shane Hallam. Download the Devy Marketplace podcast. You can listen to the three of us. You can follow me on Twitter at Shane P. Hallam, draftcountdown.com, DLF for my Devy content.
Yeah, I guess personally, Twitter is at @NellyTix. It reads a lot better than it pronounces. It'll make sense when you read. It's a play on the word analytics because I'm a nerd. And my name's Nelly, so.
Yeah, I'm Kane Fossell, so you can find me on Twitter at Devy_Kane. And then check out the Devy Marketplace. We also have a free Discord with like 700 people that just constantly want to talk about football and food and everything possible. So hop on in there. It's completely free. Just come and hang out.
Eric Froton, NBC Sports, Roto World. Write about college fantasy football, Devy, and college football player props, which we are getting into the market of. 70% over the past 3 years, the most profitable venture you can have in all of fantasy sports. Trust me.
How's it going? I'm Denny. I run NFL Mock Draft Database, so it's a really good resource for Devy, I think, in the future, because you have people like Shane doing 2027 mock drafts. And so it's a good aggregate. I basically aggregate all the mock drafts out there in the world, so it'll give you an idea of player rankings in the future. And then I also recently started DevyRankings.com, which is basically Devy rankings, but aggregated. So it's the same idea, only just Devy focused. So if you ever need rankings, future player evaluations, that's the place to go.
I actually utilize that website quite a bit when I'm trying to figure out. When I'm trying to figure out who I'm or where I'm projecting people before the NFL draft for Devy leagues or for rookie drafts that are happening before that. I use that website quite a bit.
All right, thanks everybody. Thank you.